Hey soldiers, so you got a letter in the mail from the IRS. They're auditing you. What do you do now? Maybe pack a bag and head for Mexico?
Get your ass up! We gotta get the fuck out of here now!
Come on! Oh, that's probably a bad idea. Mexico does have a extradition treaty with the United States. Don't panic. Listen, we're going to go over some things that you need to do if you're contacted by the IRS and they want to audit you. And if you think that this is unlikely, consider this. Now, it's funny because I was reading this website. They were talking about tax preparation and the likelihood of you being audited. And they put it in a kind of a snarky way. They start out by saying, if you are one of the less than 1% of the people who receive an IRS audit letter, don't panic. Now, less than 1% of the population of the United States of America. We're at around 325 million people. So that means approximately 3 million people get audited every single year. I'd love those odds on a Powerball jackpot. So maybe it is likely. And you might also be tempted to think, well, yeah, but those audits, those are for people who are rich. Actually, as you can see from the chart, IRS audits occur most often to the lowest income wage earners. Everyone else and all taxpayers are audited far less than the lowest earners. Now, the reason for that, two of the reasons are, there could be more, is the fact that people who are in the lower income brackets are trying to do their taxes themselves. Now, the tax code is literally thicker than several Bibles, and it changes all the time. So if you're trying to monkey around with, Tax Act or Tax Pro or TurboTax, and you don't know the tax code, then you're probably going to have an issue at some point. So I know that for most people who are in the lower income brackets, it might be a bit of a stretch to say, hey, you need to go and get yourself an actual person, be it H&R Block or somewhere like that, Jackson Hewitt. I am not endorsed by these companies at all. Just naming them because they're top of mind. Someone who can interpret your tax return. And that is only if, I only recommend those businesses if you're a W-2 employee making a simple income. By simple, what I mean is there are not too many deductions going on. There's not all this stuff that you might find with a small business owner. Now, if you're a small business owner, you need to go ahead and pay for a CPA to do your taxes. Someone who is very reputable, has a good depth of experience and knowledge in tax preparation and interpretation of the tax code. You want the CPA that's actually going to the various conferences that the IRS gives in order to update these professionals on those tax codes. Now, let's go over some things that you want to do when you are dealing with the IRS, okay? When they are coming at you in terms of wanting to wanting to audit you. We're going to get into 3 key things that you have to do when you are facing an audit. But first, let's go over some just general information to give you a flavor for why they audit you. All right, there are 2 types of IRS audit. There is the letter audit, and then there is the office audit. The letter audit is exactly what it sounds like. They are going to send you correspondence in the mail, and they're going to ask you some questions that you need to respond to. And this isn't something you can put on the counter and just forget about it. You need to get on this. If you pick that letter out of the mail at 5 p.m. on a Monday, you need to be on this Tuesday morning, trying to, sort out what's going on. And the way you want to do that is with a professional on your side. This is why you should be going in to have a professional do your taxes, no matter whether you're a W-2 employee or a small business owner. Now, we've already seen that the lower income brackets get audited more often. And the reasons for that, the most common reasons why we see these audits is unreported income. Now, some people might be making a legitimate mistake in not reporting income, especially in this new environment where the IRS has made it very clear that they want to see you filling out certain forms to when you pay someone, okay, as little as $600. They want you to fill out an IRS form because the person receiving that, the IRS is looking at that as income. So if you paid some kid a couple of times a year to, cut the lawn and clean the pool, and she racked up $600 worth of compensation from you, the IRS wants to know about that. So as this becomes more complex, they're hiring 80,000 IRS agents, and they're not hiring these people to sit around the office and drink coffee. They are hiring them to do a job and collect money. This is the most assertive bill collection agency the world has ever known. So we got unreported income, whether that be unreported via a simple mistake because you didn't know all the rules, okay, like the $600 rule, or whether it be something that folk are engaged in purposely. Then you got filing status. A lot of people mess up on the filing status aspect of it. Dependents. How many dependents do you really have? Let's sort this out. Let's look into that. Itemized deductions, and then eligibility for credits. These are the most common reasons why folk are audited. And if you, to any of these, if you say, what's that? That, again, substantiates the fact that you need a professional on your side. Because what do you do at your job or at your business every day? Unless it's tax preparation, you need a professional. So we talked about the letter audit. They're going to send you that letter, and it's going to request some additional information. You need to get on the phone the next day or later on that day if you got the mail earlier, and you need to speak with your professional immediately. Just because you receive a letter from the IRS doesn't mean you're being audited. In many cases, the IRS will send a letter simply asking for additional information or clarification of details listed on your tax return. So slow down. I know you're running to the airport trying to get the hell out of the country. Don't worry. It may not be as serious as you thought. An IRS audit letter will come to you by certified mail. When you open it, it will identify your name, your taxpayer ID, form number, employer ID, and contact information. Okay, so they got all of this, and they're making sure they're contacting the right person. They know who you are. The first line of text within your letter from the IRS may state something along the lines of your state or federal, we're talking about federal income tax return for the year shown above has been selected for examination. When the federal government is examining you, you should take it very, very seriously. Now, if this is an audit, in most mail audits, the IRS requests receipts and documentation to prove that the item in question on your return is, within their guidelines. They also may want an explanation of the circumstances that led to you filing in that particular manner. All right, now hang with me because in a minute we're going to go over 3 things that you have to remember anytime you're interacting with the IRS or the federal government in general. Now, the office audit, the IRS requests that you bring specific documentation to your local IRS office where the audit will be conducted. So they're saying, come on in, buddy. We got some things to talk about. Now, how would you feel? I know I'm beating a dead horse, but it's fine. How would you feel walking into that big old federal building by yourself, no representation with you? You got your, little box of receipts. Okay, all right, you're picking up what I'm putting down? Okay, so what do? Let's go over some ways in which, if you're audited, you can be in the best possible position. Number 1, never, ever lie to the government. And remember, the IRS is a part of the government. Don't lie to them verbally if you're having a conversation, and do not lie to them in writing on a form. Most of the forms you fill out for the federal government are considered federal affidavits. And there have been plenty of people. Police Commissioner of Baltimore City, 2 of them in recent years, in the last 2 decades, have gone to prison for lying on federal forms. One was involving taxes. Another one was involving a mortgage using federally backed funds. In fact, the state's attorney of Baltimore City, she is under indictment currently. She lost her election, so she will not be the state's attorney as of January 1st. But she lost her election and is under federal indictment. It is alleged that she lied on a federal form dealing with some real estate and PPP funding. Okay? Never lied to the government. And this is the other thing. You should not be talking to the government without representation. It's a bad idea. Okay? You definitely, IRS will share with you. They'll be very forthright in communicating with you that you do have the right to representation. Avail yourself of that right. Never lie to the government, because then you're going to be in a position where you have a tax problem, and then you could have a perjury problem as well. We already talked about it, but I'll say it again. It bears repeating. Get yourself some representation to do your taxes. And as you are vetting this person or this firm, here is one of the questions you want to ask. Well, two, have you all been through any audits? Do you handle that sort of thing? And if I am audited, will you all represent me before, the IRS? And again, if you're just working 9 to 5 and you don't want any parts of owning your own business, because one of the reasons is because taxes can get complicated, still, you got to still ask H&R Block or whoever you're dealing with, or the local CPA that does, you got to ask them, are you going to be able to represent me before the IRS if I have one of these audits? And how many of these have you done? I don't want to hear that, I'm the first, okay? Might not turn out too well. You, CPA, might get a lot of experience. I might get fines, and coming out of my pocket with a lot of money at the least. We talked about responding immediately. Respond immediately to these IRS queries, okay? Jump right on it. You're going to also find that if you try to call the IRS, this is why another reason you need representation. If you try to call them, you're going to be on hold for a long, long time. And this is one of the other reasons. This is one of the legitimate reasons why the IRS does need to be have adequate staffing. I'm not suggesting that 80,000 people, giving them personnel on par with the Pentagon. I'm not suggesting that 80,000 people is the magic number, but something does need to be done in terms of being able to bring more capacity so that they can answer the questions that taxpayers have, sort things out moving forward. And the last thing I want to say, before I get to that last thing, let me say this. Look, I am not going to fight this battle because I know a lot of people have a big problem with paying taxes. The income tax came into existence in 1913 officially here in the United States, and yes, the government does spend money in a profligate manner. It is true that there's no disputing that. When we got folk in this country sleeping on the streets, and then we're sending billions to Ukraine, come on, how can you possibly square that circle? So yeah, how we spend money is ridiculous, and we could stand to spend a whole lot less. Look at our national debt. Okay, we display this from time to time. Look at how fast that number is increasing. But look, the way you dispute the taxation system in this country is not by refusing to pay your taxes. If anybody suggests that you shouldn't be paying taxes and so don't, run. That's not the way to do it. There is a legislative process. There are regulatory processes that you can endeavor in order to change things with regard to taxation. And we went over it 1,000 times. If you really don't like taxation system in America, well, if you don't like it in your state, you can move to another state. I know plenty of people that have done that. And if you have a big problem with taxation in America, you think, at the end of the day, it's theft that you can't possibly, deal with anymore, well, you're free to take up residence in another country. That's perfectly fine. Nomad capitalism. that channel covers that on a regular basis. People do that. Okay, so documentation. Keep documentation. Document everything. If it wasn't documented, it didn't happen. That is some advice that I got when I started out in my career in regulatory and legislative affairs. If it ain't documented, it didn't happen. Now that swings both ways. If it wasn't documented, it didn't happen from the standpoint of, some trouble you might, find yourself in. But if it wasn't documented, then it didn't happen. In front of the IRS means if you took a deduction for something and you don't have any documentation to substantiate that, then they're not going to let you take that deduction, okay? Keep documentation. Speak with your CPA, your accounting firm, the tax preparer, and ask them what is the best way for you to maintain that documentation. You want to hear from them. You don't want to walk in there with a box of receipts and some of them got coffee stains on them. You don't want to do that. And here's, one's balled up in your pocket. Hey, don't forget about that one. No, you want some rock solid documentation that people can look at and say, hey, this is a serious person and they're keeping good records. That will work in your favor in terms of any audit you run into. So that's the way you deal with it. All right, soldiers, can this thing called Marcus by Goldman Sachs, can it really help you supercharge your savings? Let's take a look at this video and learn more about whether or not Marcus by Goldman Sachs is worthy of you actually taking a look at it. Can it help your money work harder than it's working now? Check it out. Guys, I'll talk to you soon.